electorate to try and become leader, but they then need to say something to the British people if the Labour Party is to be taken seriously on these issues and wider issues again. I think it was a great tragedy for this country that we did what we did. I deeply regret the way that vote was taken in the House of Commons. I deeply regret being far too loyal to my leader, because I had misgivings at the time, and I think it was quite wrong. And I think we do need to move on from that as a country.
You voted for the war out of loyalty?
I voted for it out of loyalty after a lot of persuasion, because I took my disagreements to the leader at the time, because I was very unhappy about it.
To be fair, as I understand it, your leader at the time has not changed his position.
No, he strongly believed it, and he thinks it was a thing worth doing, and he would defend it very strongly. We disagree, but I think the mood of the nation generally is that it wasn't well judged and there was much misery as a result of it all, and I hope we learn from it, and I think the Labour Party will be well served if their leadership contenders not only learn from it to win the leadership election, but then have a conversation with the British people to try and put it right.
Okay. Yeah. Let's move on to another question. So I know that we can go on about Iraq for a whole programme every week, as a matter of fact, but let's not. We'll take a question from Howard Bonner, please. Mr. Bonner.
What steps can the leaders of our government take to stop more of their inflexible and die-hard backbenchers from derailing the coalition?
What can the government do to stop... Are they thinking of you?
I shouldn't think so.
Are you thinking of Mr. Redwood?
Well, when I wrote the
Perish the thought, yes.
When I wrote the question, I hadn't read Mr. Redwood's article.
Right, but you've now read his article attacking capital gains tax, the changes proposed and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Would that come into your... in your sights?
Well, yes, it would. I you know, have
all right,
sure.
John Redwood, what can the new government do to stop, let's not say people like you, but some of the more inflexible and die-hard backbenchers?
Well, the government must govern wisely, and it will then get the support it deserves. But we do want a more open democracy. Now, I'm not a rebel, and some of the press commenters have been extremely misleading. I'm not a rebel. There's nothing to rebel against. There is no detailed proposal yet on capital gains tax. I want an open conversation. That, I think, makes for a better democracy. So I put forward a working proposal which I think meets the Lib Dem requirement to tax short-term gains at income tax rates. It meets the Lib Dem and the Conservative government requirement to tax people more on their capital gains. But I'm making the very important point that if you put the rate up, you may collect less money. If you put the rate up, you may have less business going on and fewer jobs created. If you put the rate up too much, you clobber people with savings. You catch a lot of people who aren't very rich, and the rich will be away. They'll go somewhere else, or they'll have good advisors, and they won't be paying it anyway. So I hope the government will listen, and I think if we have an intelligent conversation, that isn't rebellion, that isn't making the government's life difficult. It is a good idea to get the policy straight first, before positions get dug in, and before you then need rebellions.
But you say you're not rebelling, but you are rebelling against Vince Cable, the business secretary, who said...
I think he's part of the conversation. I don't think I'm rebelling against.
The Redwood plan involves going back to the arrangement introduced by the last Labour government. I'm not sure reinventing the wheel is the best way forward.
I think the wheel is a very good way forward. Round wheels do work extremely well, and I recommend them strongly.
Right, but you're not in rebellion. What do you make of the coalition that you discovered when you came back from America? There you appeared not to have heard about it until you got home.
I think it is one of the most ludicrous things I've ever witnessed. I really do. I just don't understand how we're just accepting this. And you all seem so desperately uncomfortable with each other, and you're all beginning to fall out after, what, 2 weeks? I personally, I would give it till Christmas. Seriously. I mean, we have to go back to the polls. There has to be another election. There has to be clarity here. You cannot have two... I mean, the idea that Liberal Democrat voters thought they were going to get John Redwood as their voice of reason, I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Really.
You say in the pink shirt.
I think it's important that there is real dialogue taking place with backbenchers, because otherwise you just have a rubber stamp. And I think we're talking about new politics, and in reality, you know, we're talking interested in career politicians, we're interested in real dialogue, and backbenchers need to have an important say, I feel.
Okay. Susan Kramer, watching it as a defeated MP for the Liberal Democrats.
You must rub this in, mustn't you?
Well, it's just so people, you know, people may think you still are in the House.
You should have won.
First time you've been in on the programme since the election. Go on, what do you think? Are you going to be derailed? Why are you confident sitting next to John Redwood?
Well, I've always been comfortable sitting next to John Redwood. We've agreed on numerous things. Yes, I know. No, I mean, it is something of a camel, that camels get very successfully through the desert. And it seems to me that, you know, the challenge of the deficit is one that has forced people to focus on the absolute priorities, which are getting the deficit down. It's forced two parties who wouldn't naturally have seen themselves as allies to sit down and see if they can come together with a common programme, and I think they've done it extraordinarily successfully, and it reflects priorities from both parties. And it seems to be it's moving forward rather well, and at least on the Lib Dem side, that's you know, extensive conversation with backbenchers. I would assume the same thing happening on the Conservative side. And when I talk to people in my constituency, I mean, the number of them who've said, "Oh, if we'd only known it this outcome, we'd have voted for you," you know. So I find that that actually people really want this to actually work. I mean, they're saying politicians need to sit down and work together, forget sort of party shibboleths, and try and find an effective way forward. And it is happening. And I think...
Yes, but with the greatest respect to this wonderful loving, you've already, within 2 weeks, had Mr Redwood, who has speared the #1 Liberal Democrat policy right in your back.
Oh, you're going back to being the member of the press, always trying to find trouble, because I think there will be a sensible conversation.
He's causing trouble.
I'm trying to meet their aims.
You lot want a 40% capital gains tax. He says it's nonsense.
For that matter, Ming Campbell has said he'll vote against tuition fees going up.
Well, that's
that
is Ming's decision.
Well, he's a senior Liberal Democrat.
I understand that. We have our John Redwoods
will vote
too.
against the schools policy too, I think.
But
Nobody ever mentioned Europe yet. This is all going to come out.
The important part of capital gains tax is this is what permits...
No, I know, it's going to.
We need strong government. You should be very grateful.
You're not a strong government, you're already divided. Look at you.
We're about to agree.
A camel gets through the desert.
I'm very struck by the number of people everywhere one goes. The terrific number of people want this to work, I mean, among the public. And it is very striking that all sorts of hard-nosed Tories and soft, wet Lib Dems have been saying, "Oh, isn't this marvellous? This is the way forward, this is the way it's going to be."
Well, of course, it's the only way you can get power. Of course you do.
That's up.
I'm sorry, but really, this is ridiculous.
Personally, I've always felt since day one the idea of the Lib Dems, who on many issues at the left of the Labour Party, getting together with the Tories, does seem inherently pretty weird. Now, actually, at the moment, your party colleagues are so thrilled to have chauffeurs and red boxes and all the other nice things. They never thought they were going to get a look at.
They're walking to work.
I cannot believe, never mind the backbenchers, I think there's going to be plenty of trouble with the front benchers before we get to Santa Claus.
Who's going to be the first to go, do you think?
Uncle Vince.
I think it's going to be the Lib Dems who are going to be the losers out of this. I will bet that Nick Clegg ends up as toast somewhere in all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think you're wrong. I mean, if you look at this policy, this allows the tax threshold to be gradually lifted.
You're talking about the capital gains tax?
But that
income
part
tax.
of that, it's all linked together. And that's the reason why people like John are willing to entertain it, because there's actually a Lib Dem policy that I think they fundamentally
But you were supposed to be a radical party. You were supposed to be a radical party.
We're persuasive.
And you are
Hold on a second.
Max, you said everyone is really enjoying this, and then you end up by saying Nick Clegg's going to be toast.
No, I'm saying the public.
Which one is it? Either of them really wants it, or
people who think this is wonderful, but I just don't think it's going to work.
Do you support John Redwood against this proposal from David Cameron and your leader? If
there isn't a proposal.
Sorry, there's no proposal.
No, not
you
yet,
write long letters to people, that's not a proproposal.
Mine is a proposal.
Yeah, that's
they
what I'm
haven't
saying.
come up with
Susan supports it.
Do you support
I'm more in favour of the original proposal for capital gains. It'll have to be worked out because we've got to offset and allow this raising of the tax threshold. But also, I'm in favour of tax simplification,
would you be saying that now?
which John is in favour of. Actually, this is a big step towards preventing
It doesn't
people
work
playing
anyway. They
fun
tried it in
games.
America. It doesn't work.
If you were in the House of
Commons...
Commons...
They reduced capital gains. They actually made more money.
If you were in the House of Commons, would you vote against it?
If you move towards tax...
Would you vote against it if you had been re-elected for Richmond Park?
Against the C...
Against what John Redwood's saying?
Would depend on what the total package was that came out. For me, the priority is lifting... The priority is lifting...
No, not for a moment. The man in the blue pullover with a white shirt, a little bit further back. You, sir. Yes.
Piers, you mentioned that the coalition won't last until Christmas, but I think the worry would be taking the country to the polls again. I think it would be an insult to the people. I think we were lucky to have the turnout that we did at the election.
But the people haven't.
We lost the trust.
Nobody's got what they actually thought they were voting for. The Liberal Democrat voters
They've
have
got
got
bits.
John Redwood, right? The Tory voters
aren't up
have
and
got
right.
people who want to take away all their second homes
All right.
and wreck their
The man
wealth.
here in the second
This
row,
is not
please.
what people voted for.
All right, Piers. The man here in the second row. Lady.
I
Sorry.
think Piers is actually
Nice,
right. We've got two parties that have joined together whose values are poles apart, who are now playing happy families. I find it actually quite patronising.